Welcome to Straight to the Point. I'm your host, Representative Joe Diorsi. In a world of long-windedness, I'm here to deliver you the capital news in 10 minutes or less. So, let's get straight to the point. So welcome to part 2 of my journey with Mr. A. Marc Anderson, he's the new representative from the 92nd Legislative District, which encompasses what, Marc?
Most of northern York County. So that would be everything that is made up of the northern York County School District, Fairview Township, and Newberry Township. And then there's numerous municipalities. We go down to York Haven and Goldsboro, and then down through Wellsville, and then the northern part of Dover.
Okay. Yeah, we border in a lot of our districts.
Yes,
I know
yes,
that
we do.
York Haven is, I guess the creek up there is the border. So you were just assigned your committees, and they are Education, Human Services, Game and Fisheries, and Labor and Industry. We talked heavy on part 1 about education. What are your thoughts on your other assignments, Game and Fisheries, L&I, and Human Services?
Well, the way we do this is you put in for 5, and then you get some of those. It seems to me like kind of a draft. I don't know how they do it at the top, but that's what it felt like a little bit. Game and Fisheries I put down because I'm an avid fisherman, so it is a personal interest of mine, and we come from an area, my district, there are a lot of sportsmen, hunters, fishermen, so I thought that that's something that I was passionate about, but also something that represents a large portion of my constituency. The other 2, I was placed on those. That doesn't mean that I'm not excited about them, but I have a lot to learn about labor and industry and human services. In fact, human services, I've done a lot of reading on what exactly do they do. What I like about the human services is it seems like there's a lot of work to help those people who need our help most, whether that be, I teach kids and taught kids for 30 years. You have a responsibility to stand for people who can't stand for themselves. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to live that out on human services. Labor and industry, I have a lot to learn. We were talking about that a little bit this morning, you and I. So that probably is the one where I have the most that I have to dig in and learn what labor and industry as far as what comes before the committee is all about.
That's a good committee. You'll join me on that committee as well as education. But York County is so rich, as you know, in manufacturing. I know it's number 1 in my district. It's probably in the top 3 in yours.
Sure.
So you will have a great opportunity to represent and fight for the interests of your businesses and manufacturing plants.
Yeah. And over the summer, I plan to do a lot more of this here in the winter and spring. I kind of did a little tour of talking to local businesses and area businesses, how we can help them be successful and how we can help them and their employees. And so I feel like that was a useful background, even not knowing that I was going to be on that committee. But my staff and I also are planning a tour here in the spring to visit businesses within our district. So preparing for that.
Yeah, excellent. So in part 1, we talked everything education.
Correct.
Education, obviously, when you ran and as you head into your first session here, isn't your only legislative priority.
Correct.
Can you talk about some of the other goals you have for this session?
Sure. I was born in 1970, so I turned 10 in 1980, 18 in 1988. So a lot of who I am, specifically with politics, was formed by the age of Reagan. So I am I would say, disciple of limited government, and often it is beneficial to individuals, to businesses, to churches, schools, if the government just gets out of the way and allows people to make their own decisions and their own way in life, and we provide people with the liberty to do that. So limited government, really that kind of plays into every single thing that I believe in. As far as specifics, I think we need to fix our elections and primarily make sure that people trust them. And that's not, to me, that's a bipartisan issue. If people don't trust their elections, really none of the other things that we talk about
matter. Yeah,
So
7 out of 10 people, at least in Pennsylvania, agree with voter ID.
Correct. If they're not secure and we can't trust them, the issues that we believe in, we can't push forward because there will always be that doubt. There will always be cynicism towards what is going on. Election ID has to be the number one thing. It's simple. Other states have it. It's not that hard. It's just a common sense issue that you should be able to prove who you are. It shows up at the election. 2 or 4 election cycles ago, my son was registered in 2 states because he moved around for his job. So Virginia never took him off the rolls. When he came back to Pennsylvania after 7 years, he went to register, and they said, "Oh, you don't need to register. You're already registered." So he could have had 2 votes in that election. They hadn't taken my dad off the rolls yet. I could have voted in and he was passed away.
And these aren't even nefarious examples.
No,
They're just...
exactly. So our for somebody that says, well, everything's okay, my family of 4 could have had 6 votes.
Yeah.
So there's 330 million Americans. You know, what does that mean across the board? So it's common sense voter ID. The Pennsylvania Constitution calls for election day, not an election season. That does not mean that I'm against restricting people from voting. People that are unable to get to the polls for whatever reason, we should have a way for them to vote. And that's called an absentee ballot.
Yep.
But the more you open it up,
so no excuse mail-ins. You'd like to see us go back and get
absolutely,
rid of that?
Absolutely. A college student, military, somebody who's handicapped or senior citizen, absolutely absentee ballots, mail-in ballots for those people. Even a work schedule. You know, they should, but you should have a reason. And when you open it up to 3 months and unlimited mail-ins, it just opens up the door for fraud.
It does.
And you can't say, well, the fraud doesn't exist because we didn't find it. Well, that's a ridiculous argument. There are examples, first of all, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And we know from example to example that there is fraud on both sides, quite frankly, in the election. So I think we should secure them as much as possible, but also maximize the opportunity for everybody to vote.
Yeah. So what about government waste? I've heard you say, I like the term bureaucracy when we talk about wading through the red tape and the government waste, the regulations. What's your plan of attack here to limit that?
Well, I have a lot to learn on the specifics. So I think starting with one thing at a time, as you know, education is my passion. You know, what is effective that's coming out of the Department of Education? And what are we spending money on that is wasteful? And that doesn't even mean that somebody's doing that purposefully. But what is working, what is not working? Example is professional development within the schools. We waste a lot of money on professional development that doesn't help teachers. They're just jumping through a hoop because the Department of Education says you have to have these Act 80 days, you have to train teachers. But
and it
really
can take them away from their core duties, does
absolutely, it not? Absolutely. There's a lot of time wasted. I know the administrators across the state that might listen to this are kind of cringing, but everybody knows it. Everybody knows that every teacher dreads Act 80 days because they consider it a waste of time. So are we wasting money doing something that we're just doing, jumping through hoops, but is really hindering teachers from doing their core duties and doing what's best for kids? So, for instance, that's just a great example of how much money are we spending on it, and then is that money being spent effectively?
So, parting thought here, the Founding Fathers, who we have so much veneration for and respect, it sounds like, since you taught civics and history, you know, a lot of those original thoughts and documents and statements ring true to you today. Now, we're in 2025 now. It doesn't look like it did then, and things have changed. There's a lot more people.
Absolutely.
But what are some of the core principles that from those days that you'd like to bring back to Pennsylvania government?
Well, when I teach, the Constitution obviously governs us and sets up the system. But I believe the Declaration of Independence defines who we are to be. And I would love if every single American would go read the second section of the Declaration of Independence, where Thomas Jefferson, actually a committee of 5 together, a lot of it is John Adams' words, but Thomas Jefferson put them to paper, defines the purpose of government and who we should be. You don't have to know every word of the Constitution, but if you read that paragraph, it's understood that government is responsible to people, period. It doesn't say anything about a bureaucracy. In fact, that second paragraph talks about it doesn't use the word bureaucracy, but it talks about government being too large, and it's a responsibility of people to throw off a government that is irresponsible and is abusive of the people. And I think we just don't notice it as humans. We don't see it coming. I had a trip in Cuba, a missions trip right in the middle of the campaign, and one of the ladies, Cuban, said we were complicit. Said it in Spanish, but that's how it got translated, in that we thought that what Castro was bringing was better. And we didn't see how he was going to control the people. And every day since then, since we made the decision to be complicit, it's been worse here in Cuba. So I would love to teach the legislature that second paragraph if I ever get the opportunity. And, I don't think that's going to happen, but I would love to teach some legislators about the Declaration of Independence. So
they would sorely need that lesson, Mr. A. And I'll end with a quote from the Declaration of Independence: "Let facts be submitted to a candid world."
Absolutely,
that's my favorite saying.
Absolutely, and I'll double down on that and say that the founders risked something for that. And so for the last line is that they were willing to sacrifice everything, their fortunes and their lives, and more importantly, their sacred honor. Yes,
there you go, in unison. He's Mr. A. He was a history and civics teacher in his former life. And now he is a legislator, and we are glad to have him. Thanks for joining me, Mark.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
This has been Straight to the Point. Visit repjod.com/mypodcasts.